Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, another edition of what I call Heavy Thoughts. This is where I take a moment to share with you what has been on my mind lately. And what has been on my mind lately is, when should an artist retire from performing live? What got me thinking about this topic was this: there's been some clips of John Bon Jovi performing at some kind of award ceremony. I think he does Living on a Prayer. And it's very clear that his voice is damaged, or he's struggling. He's struggling to hit the notes. He's struggling to sing the lines. It sounds like there's just no strength, power left in his voice. And it just got me thinking about when does an artist reach a point where they should retire? And as a fan, when is that point for me? When do I say, you know what, I don't want to spend the ticket money on this anymore. Your performance is not at the level that I find to be acceptable, or for me to, pay a ticket price for. Now, I don't want this video to be a bashing video, a let's list singers who we think can't sing anymore. And I don't want it to be about that, because I don't want it to turn into a negative thing. And I also understand that being a hard rock, heavy metal singer is very, very demanding. And it takes its toll on these singers. And I'm going to mostly be talking about singers here, because I think that they're the ones who, as they go on in age, their instrument takes the most abuse, and it's the hardest to sort of cover up or work around, if you will. And I'm going to make, again, not wanting to bash on people, and I'm going to make a comparison to sports and athletes, and I'm going to discuss football and hockey. I know hockey, and I know a little bit about football. Don't know anything else about any of the other sports, and they're also very physical, football and hockey. And football players and NHL players, if you have a 10, 15-year career, that's considered fantastic. Most guys are probably in around that 8 to 10, 12 years, because of how physically demanding it is playing that sport and the abuse that their bodies take. Now, these guys are prime athletes. Their bodies they have themselves in incredible shape. They know how to take a tackle or how to take a hit. But no matter how well trained and how great a shape you're in, your body is not meant to take that kind of abuse, and it tends to catch up on athletes. They tend to get injured, and this is why you don't see football players playing when they're 65, 70 years old, because their injuries have accumulated. Their bodies can't take this kind of physical stress anymore. And being a rock and a metal singer is much the same way. You can have a really good technique, but just putting that level of demand on your voice, that intensity, pushing yourself like that night after night, is very demanding, and it just takes its toll over time. The other thing is that I want to differentiate between singers who have the tone of their voice has changed over time, rather than them just not being able to hit the notes and being able to perform anymore. All right, an example of that would be Ronnie James Dio. Ronnie's voice changed as he got older. He could still hit the notes. Sometimes he adjusted his voice or his melody lines, but Ronnie was still able to hit the notes. The tone of his voice changed. It became kind of darker and a little bit thicker, but he was still able to sing the lines. He was still able to bring the emotion and intensity and hit the notes. Whereas Ozzy, when he was touring for Black Sabbath, the 13 album, I remember this being a discussion on a lot of forums. He was struggling, and he was not hitting notes. His voice was cracking. He was off pitch. He was off rhythm. So that's a different thing than what happened with Ronnie. Yes, Ronnie's tone changed, but he was still able to deliver the performance. I would say the same thing for Geddy Lee. I know that there were moments in the last Rush tours where there were nights where I heard some recordings where it sounded like, yeah, there's his voice, he's struggling. But for the most part, Geddy was always very consistent. And yes, he would change the melody lines. For instance, Temples of Syrinx, he dropped the melody line down. And I'm totally okay with that. That's somebody recognizing that, hey, I can't sing like that anymore. I've got to adjust this and change this so I can still be in tune, still have the phrasing and the strength and the energy to do these performances. It's like an athlete. I'll use the NHL as an example. Some guys start off playing 20 plus minutes a night, and as their career goes on, they play less and less, and they take a lesser role on the team because they realize that they don't physically have it anymore. So what I am talking about are artists like, for instance, Don Dokken. His voice seems like it is just damaged. Ozzy, I mentioned Ozzy already. He tends to struggle in a live situation. Paul Stanley, this is a great example. This is going to be a topic for another video, two different topics: backing tracks and when is a band not a band anymore, when they, when there's no original members, and think that's going to be another video. But Paul Stanley, these last Kiss tours, he's using backing tracks. I saw them live, and there's clearly a vocal track there, and I don't want this video to turn into an argument about whether he's using these tracks or not. If I can remember, I'll leave this video link in the description. It was a guy who took 15-20 seconds from the same song from like 5-7 different performances on one of their tours, and he lined them all up and showed you how they were exactly the same. In fact, at one point he plays all of them at the same time, and they are synced exactly the same. So it's clear that at least for that song, Paul was using, a vocal track. And when I saw them live 5 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was, it sounded like he was using a vocal track. So, and I have heard clips of him where it's clear that his voice is damaged. He doesn't have the range anymore. Maybe he's not able to adjust. They feel like if he changes the melody lines, the songs won't be the same, so they would just rather use the backing tracks. But Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull is another person who has suffered some damage to his voice. Now, I want to make it clear again that what these singers do, singing as many nights as they have all these years, it's almost expected that they're not going to be able to sing the way that they used to. I'll give an example of opera singers. Opera singers are highly trained. They are like the peak athletes that I was talking about earlier. Highly trained and know how to use their voices. They would never sing as many times in a year as these performers did when they were younger, or even as they do now, because they just realize that the strain, doing this with your voice to this high caliber, you need the time to recover, and the strain and everything that it puts on your body is just too much, and it will catch up on you over time. And I think that that's what happens to a lot of these singers is that as time goes on, the voice gets damaged. It's harder for the voice to recover, and it starts to pile up injury on injury. They become injured more. They start to lose that upper range. Again, using athletes, you see these young guys come in, they're playing great, then they have an injury, and then they lose. They're never quite the same. Then they're more prone to being injured. Some guys recover from injuries better than others, depending on what the injury is too. It's the same thing with, I think, some singers, is that their voices get beat up, but then some recover quicker than others, some adjust, and some just have voices that are superhuman, like Bruce Dickinson. You could say, again, Bruce's tone isn't the same as it was, but Bruce still hits the notes when he plays live. Rob Halford, he has to adjust his melodies. You can hear a lot of effects on his voice. I would say that he still delivers the goods, pun intended. He still delivers, although his voice is clearly not what it used to be. But again, there is one point that I didn't put in the video that I wanted to add here later on, thus the edit. Because it is so difficult for artists to make money now from physical product, because record sales, CD sales, all that is way, way down. I'm sure that there's a pressure on these artists to perform live more, because it's the only way that they really are able to make any kind of income. So there's that extra pressure on these artists to have to perform, and maybe they realize how taxing this is on their bodies and their vocal cords and everything, but they still feel like they need to get out there because it's the only way for them to make a living anymore. And I'm sure if some of these artists were given the option that, hey, you'd be able to make a comfortable living just off of record sales, you can retire from touring or cut way back on touring, they would probably do it. But because of the state of the industry now, it's really the only way that a lot of these artists are able to make money. So they feel like they have to go out there and tour and probably push themselves harder than they would really like to. So ask this question of when should these artists retire? And in a lot of ways, when I see some of these clips, and we're not talking to about one-off, everybody has a bad night. Everybody has a cold or gets sick and they have a bad night when they're performing. We're talking about singers who have clearly had damage to their voices. And, you know, sometimes I see these things and I think to myself, it would probably be better if they just retired from touring. And no one, I really don't think the fans would hold that against them. When Rush retired, I respected them for doing that. They realized that they couldn't deliver the quality of product that they wanted to deliver, or they realized that they were reaching that threshold, that they were getting to a point where it was going to be hard for them to live up to the standard of performance that they wanted to live up to. Even Neil Peart had talked about how his body, he was having, I don't know if it was arthritis or what, tendonitis or whatever, and musicians, that happens to even guys who play instruments. Bill Ward has admitted that he wouldn't be able to physically tour anymore. So I would much rather these guys just step back and say, look, I gave you all these years of great music and great performances. I'm going to step back. We're just going to be a studio band at this point, because it reaches a point where you start to say to yourself, is this taking advantage of the fans? Because there's sometimes fans that they don't know any better. You know, you look at, I think I mentioned Vince Neil. You know, now Vince Neil, he clearly is not in peak physical shape. So that's probably maybe affecting his vocal performance also. But when does it cross the line, and when does it start to take advantage of the fans and the ticket prices that the fans are paying for a lot of these shows, which is quite a bit, and the artist isn't able to deliver something at least of a certain, you know, standard. You know, when is that taking advantage of the fans? And I can't imagine, because I'm not in their position. I'm not a singer in a big famous rock band, and it's probably hard to say that, to sit back and go, you know what, I don't have it anymore, I need to step away. It's just like athletes. You know, I'm an NHL fan. And sometimes there's players that they hang around probably longer than they should. You know, they're trying to hang on. Nobody picks them up, and they take a year off. They try to come back, and it's never the same. And they turn out to get dropped from the team. And they're so, because it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to admit that you don't have what you used to have. I can't do the things I used to do when I was younger. I'm sure we can all relate to that in different aspects of our life. I just had a guy deliver a piece of glass for this big table that we have, and the guy asked him if I could help him, and I said, dude, I mean, if I can't bend over to pick this up because of my back, I will blow out my back and not be able to move for 3 months. I said, if you have it up in the air already, I can help you. But sometimes you got to admit to when you just can't do things anymore. And you know, maybe some of these guys, they should do that and just step back and say, hey, look, you know what? It's been a great run. It's time. We respect the fans. We don't want to take advantage of the fans. We're going to step back, and we're going to retire from this. So, all right, what do you guys think? I mean, again, I don't really know what the answer to this is. I mean, if Black Sabbath toured again with Ozzy, I'd go see it. When I saw them on the 13 tour, I walked into that fully knowing that Ozzy is a pretty inconsistent live performer, that he has trouble hitting the notes like he used to. But I was just happy to see Iommi and Butler and to hear these songs. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, and I guess maybe that's up to the individual. I just feel bad sometimes for people who show up at shows and maybe they're not aware. And I've been at shows where I've heard people like, oh my God, he sounds terrible, and they didn't know kind of what they were getting into. So, all right, what about you guys? Where do you draw the line? Where is it for you? When do you think an artist should retire from performing live? Again, they can still go in, make studio albums and all that. Let me know your thoughts on this topic, because it's one of those, I don't really know how I feel about it either. So let me know how you guys feel about this in the comments down below. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And until we see you again, make sure you rock hard, ride free.